Welcome to our very first episode of the Women Up North podcast. I'm Andrea, and thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait for you to meet our first guest, Tanis. Tanis is an innovative practitioner who is fascinated by people's stories and dedicated to assisting them on their healing journey. With 10 years of experience helping people to take charge of their personal health and well-being, she has created a process that enables people to release emotional blocks and transform the dense energy of pain and trauma into the ability to enjoy happier, well-balanced lives. Tanis worked as a school teacher for 20 years, which helps her to communicate her message in a clear, easily understood manner to clients of all ages. Her goal is to work her way through the 7 billion people on the planet until everyone creates their own personal feeling of happy. All right, welcome to the show, Tanis.
Thank you,
Thanks
Andrea.
for being with me.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So, as we saw, you started out as a school teacher and then you moved into the innovative practitioner role. What left you to leave teaching and move into that?
Well, it started out actually with my mom. About 40 years ago, well, I guess 40 years ago now, 50 years ago, she started to not thrive. And she wasn't sick per se. She just sort of over time got weaker and weaker. And so we love our mom and all that kind of stuff. And the doctors could not find one thing really quote unquote wrong with her. She ended up eliminating almost all of her food. So she was eating maybe 12 different items. And she had developed sensitivities and allergies to all synthetic materials. So imagine that, if you will. You can't wear your seatbelt. You can't walk on the carpet. You got to put vinyl between you and your mattress. So it started to be really, really restrictive. And the doctors did really well for many years, just sort of accommodating symptoms as they came up. But in 2004, 2003, 2004, they just said, we just don't know what this is. Like, we're just not going to be able to help you. And she sort of lost her fighting spirit then. And so we, as her children, we just weren't really all that okay to just sort of let her kind of go gently into that good night. So she was just right around 70 years old at the time. And so I got a hold of a naturopath. And the naturopath did kinesthetic muscle testing, which is an intuitive test that people use. And she said to my mom, you have parasites. You're actually going to be fine. And you've probably had them since the 60s.
Oh, man.
And so that was the sort of failure to thrive. And so this just completely fired my imagination that, do you know what I mean? You could go undiagnosed for so long that, all this kind of stuff. So physically, she started healing really quickly. And then we were led to Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And we started working on the emotional impact that took. So she spent basically 40 years restricting her living, and over and over. And pretty soon she didn't know how to live like someone who's healthy. She knew how to live like somebody who's ill. Yeah. And so I got fascinated by that whole prospect and started dabbling with myself. And really I healed myself of asthma that had been sort of later life onset asthma. And my son had a really severe milk allergy. He was born with it. And sort of through the work, he doesn't have his milk allergy anymore.
Oh, wow.
And so there was all started sort of proving that this was working, that your intuitive self, your energetic being is completely linked to your health and well-being and how you manage your life and all this. So I just got to be very, very single-minded, and I don't do anything just a little bit. I always sort of really immerse myself. And so I immersed myself in the idea and started taking as many courses as I could find, traveling all over both Canada and the US, finding teachers, reading. And then in 2006, so even only 2 years later, I actually started my own business because I was getting so many positive results, like the proof is in the pudding kind of stuff. Yeah. And I started getting so many positive results with what I was doing energetically with people that I decided to create the Healing Eye, which is my company name. And so, fast forward to 2014, and I wrote this book, that Talking to Myself, Evolving on Purpose, which is basically that sort of 10 years of learning and just sort of laying it out in a book for everyone as sort of a self-propelled workshop. And so anyway, I just completely immersed myself in it. Been doing healing work or intuitive work full time since 2011.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so in your book you talk about the 4 healing bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounds kind of like what you're touching on now.
Correct.
So what are those 4 healing bodies?
So I see us composed of first of all, I don't believe that we are our body. I believe that we interface as an energy with a body. This is quite self-evident at the time of birth and the time of death. You're seeing sort of an amalgamation of energy coming in, creating a body in utero, and then, sort of having that sort of energy and that body work together. And then at death, of course, the energy is released and the body remains. And so I sort of build around that we aren't really our body. We're actually that energy field.
Right.
And so I split those things into 4 bodies just for simplicity's sake. These are not tried and true. These are just what I call them. It's like I made it up and it sounded good at the time. So the 3 bodies that are energy bodies, you can't have surgery on these bodies. You don't have any tangibility to them, but they are literally what runs everything. So the first is your mental body. So it's basically the collection of data, the collection of information, and also sort of what I'll call the collective knowing, like where an idea comes from, right? So that's sort of the mental body. Then comes the emotional body, and that's where all the emotions are: happy, sad, mad, all that. And emotion is the body that really actually sort of animates, really truly animates and hooks you into the experience. Yeah. And all memories are created through emotion. The more intense the emotion, the more specific the memory will be. And so when we want to go and release around, a past event or whatever, we're really always working on the emotion of that, because we're always actually emotionally linked to our experience, mm-hmm. and to other people in our experience. So this is like the big body. This is the emotional body. This is where a great deal of the healing will take place. If there's trauma, it's going to be in this body. Okay. And then comes the spiritual mind body, or the spiritual body. It doesn't really have anything to do with religion, even though I'm using the word spiritual. It has to do with your belief system. And so what do you believe? Do you believe you can catch someone else's cold? Do you believe you tell the truth? This is like a system of beliefs. It's also kind of what you experientially learn throughout your life. So, don't touch the stove, it's hot. Yeah. We don't need to do that 1,000 times. We can do that once and go, oh yes, no touching the stove, right? Because it's hot. So it's kind of building on your experience. So it's allowing us to understand that when we're a tiny child, we don't have a whole lot of experiential knowledge, and so we build on it day to day, minute to minute, and that spiritual body holds that. Right. And so those 3 bodies are basically 3/4 of who you are. The last quarter is, of course, your physical body. Because those other 3 bodies are not tangible, the physical body becomes our, check your engine light. It becomes your warning system. It becomes the way you can figure out what's going on in my emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies. And so the body, this is where Louise Hay, became a good mentor, a good teacher for me, is that when we have a physical symptom or an illness or a situation, there is an emotional component, and there's a mental component and a spiritual component to that. So we use the body as a map. Right. And we use that as an entry point into where you need to be healed. So, for example, people with a lot of upper shoulder, neck pain, who have a lot of that, they tend to be overly responsible. They're always feeling responsible for other people, for their happiness. They're very much givers. They, nurturing. Yeah. You're going to find all those people with that sort of symptom, that they're probably over nurturers and they're under nurturing themselves. Yeah, so all their energy is going towards someone else. So what you'll create over time is sort of chronic pain in this area, and a lot of people have that chronic pain. So, but they don't necessarily equate it to the sense of responsibility they feel.
Yeah, of course.
Right, yeah. And so it's super exciting to watch someone make that connection and recognize that the energy is that. is really connected to the body and to the emotion. Of course, it's all one thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm splitting them into 4, but it's really all one thing. It's all one energy. But I think people spend a lot of time and energy on that physical body, like really being worried about it, being concerned about it, which is really good. We should look after that temple. It's our interface. I mean, This is the most important piece of your computer, right? But we forget that if we had mental health and spiritual health and emotional health, if we really put our attention on those things to be healthy, our physical body would immediately follow suit.
Right, yeah. I definitely understand that with my shoulder issues.
Yeah, no coincidences.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, with those 4 bodies, women that are trying to start their own businesses and feel a lot of fear, maybe like guilt that they're taking away from their families, that they're taking their time away, what area would that be in?
So that comes what we were just talking about, which is self-nurturing.
Yeah.
A lot of people, we've heard the question, the esoteric spiritual question, what would love do now, right?
Yeah.
We've all heard that. And I think that there's been a misinterpretation around that. And this is something that I know from Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God. And he brought this up in that book. And what he says in the book is that what happens is when we ask what would love do now, we tend to go right toward the other.
Right.
What does that other person need? So they'll feel loved. Well, I can tell you with absolute certainty, nothing you are ever going to do will create enough love for that person to feel loved. That is an internal process. We need to love ourselves first, then we can accept it from somebody else. So a lot of times what happens is you get over-nurturers now becoming they're going to go into a business, and now they're even nurturing the business. So the business becomes the next child.
Yeah.
And it can suck out a lot of that energy. You need to be really empowered in the self. You need to understand that when I'm healthy, every person I'm caring for is being brought into that healthy environment. They may not actually exhibit the same amount of health, but they now have someone to go to who has health and vitality and well-being. And I think that, throughout the eons of time of people caring for other people, they tend to do so very selflessly. I'm not taking away from how selfless an act these people are, but they will burn out. Yeah. And resentment and anger and will happen. That will. Or melancholy or depression. Something will happen because you can't feed people with an empty soup pot. And so you have to make soup, right? Yeah. So if you think about nurturing yourself as making soup, then you have all the energy to assist. And I mean that even with a business. This business, my business, is a reflection of who I am. So when I'm healthy, so is my business. Yeah. It's because I'm the nurturer and the creator of it. I always say I created it from scratch, so it's totally mine. And so it reflects where I'm at. So my spiritual, mental, and emotional health are the most important thing to me. And I was speaking with a man who works in the funeral business, and I said, if I don't look after me, how could I possibly look after everyone who's in a state of distress? Because, the people who come to me aren't happy-go-lucky and got their life by the tail. The people who want healing work or intuitive counseling are struggling in some area of their life. Maybe not all areas, but in some area of their life, they're saying, I know there's more for me. And so always, always, always bringing back to the self. And so when somebody is seeking to create anything, so if they're creating a business, if they're creating a family, if they're creating a career, if they're creating a quilt, I don't care what you're creating, a team, you will need to be empowered. You will need to be self-nurturing. You will need to be as healthy as you can be. Yeah. And if you're not, go ahead and do those in synchronistically. Work on your health as you build it. So then it builds too, right? You don't have to wait till you're super healthy and then start a business. But I don't want to misinterpret that. But I'm saying really remember that the health of whatever you're creating is going to be exactly like the health of you.
Yeah, so as you build up your own health, your business will just keep getting better and better.
Of course,
Yeah,
of course. It's
definitely.
the only way that we are the creator, right?
Yeah.
We are the creator of our lives. And so how we create, if we're creating from a lot of fear or worry or uncertainty, that will show up in your creation.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. For you personally, what are some of the like empowering beliefs that you tell yourself or that you work with yourself to?
Right. So first thing, my body is a temple. It needs to be rested. It needs to be fed. I am not a vegetarian or vegan or any of those beautiful things. I am what I call a conscious eater. So when I go to eat something, I'm absolutely checking in that my body is willing and able to accept it. I work with a lot of energy, so energy isn't good or bad to me. It's either heavy or it's light.
Right.
So for the most being, because I nurture self and I love myself and I keep myself there, I don't tend to be drawn to dense foods. So not a lot of processed foods. Haven't drank alcohol since I was 23.
Wow.
It just does not like my body. It wasn't a sort of, a statement or anything. It was just simply did not interface with my body very well. And have drank milk for a long time. Again, it just, not because it's bad, it just interfaces with my body poorly.
Yeah.
And but I don't really necessarily have a judgment around those things, because I think judgment around food is actually worse than actually just eating or not eating it. So consciously eating, drink a lot of water. I don't drink coffee, again, not a statement, just don't like it. So I just find that when I'm conscious about what I'm ingesting, my body is so certain. It is so certain about what it wants to take in. And the other thing I do is, again, rest. I mentioned that at the beginning, but rest is super important to me. If I'm tired, I sleep. Yeah. I don't try to push myself through. I'm like, no, I know that when I sleep, I get up, I have all the energy I need. The other thing is I have a very focused mind. We have no control over what comes into our thoughts.
Of course.
But we do have 100% control over what stays. And so I am very selective about the lines of thought I will allow myself to go down. So if I catch myself going down a thoughts of fear or anxiety or whatever, I'll acknowledge it, because there's no use avoiding it. Avoiding doesn't work either. But I'll actually pull it out and look at it and go, okay, well, where is this coming from? And so I'll sort of look, oh, well, some anxiety around, I don't know, going on a podcast. And so I'm like, well, what's the worst, best, dense, whatever kind of thing that could happen? And so I immediately sort of check in when those negative thoughts are coming up. I don't become the thought.
Yeah.
Super, super duper important. I don't actually become that thought. I actually sort of observe it. And I observe it and I extract all of it out of it. But then I'm like a super analyzer. I love to analyze. And I'm going to change the word analyze to curious. Yeah. I'm very curious about how things are creating. And I know my thoughts create. So there are three components to creation: thought, word, and deed. Okay. So if I think something, it will create at one level. If I think and speak it, it will create at another level. If I think, speak, and do it, it will be made manifest. Like I'll be experiencing it. So sometimes I don't let things get past the thought part. I also do what I call a negativity diet. I do not necessarily sit around a lot of dense people, like people who are in a lot of fear or who are in a lot of sadness or a lot of bitching sessions or whatever. I gift them with my absence. I gift them with my absence, and I gift me with my absence from that. Again, not a judgment, just saying I don't really have anything to add to what they're saying, so I just don't take part, right? Yeah. The other thing, don't watch the news a lot. I find that if I need to know something, it comes up. I don't need to really do that. If I do so consciously, knowing that I can't, if I'm going to follow something up with an action. So if I'm watching a show about starving children in Africa, I should think I could get on a plane and go and do something about that, and rather than just worry about it from my home.
Yeah.
Or feel bad about it. So
just let it get you down.
Just let it get me down or feel inadequate in some way. So unless I'm going to back something up with an action, I don't give it a lot of energy. And the other thing is, I always going to address Facebook because lots of people have issues around that. I see Facebook as my kitchen table. If you were being rude or disrespectful at my kitchen table, or you weren't willing to talk with me, have a conversation with me consciously, you're probably not going to be on my feed. And just because I get to decide the energy that comes into my being. And if it's not going to assist me in any way, it's not going to be there. So, lots of people think, oh, well, then you're just living through rose-colored glasses, but not really. I just think I'm conscious of what energy can do with and for and to me. So I'm very selective in the energy that I put my attention on.
Yeah, so basically all of your empowerment for yourself is coming through being conscious of your surroundings.
Absolutely.
The best way to empower yourself.
But not judging anything good or bad. Yeah. Like staying out of judgment and going into observation for the most part. I think if a single best thing you could ever do to anyone, for yourself and for anyone, is to go into observation. Observe yourself. Don't get down on yourself, right? Say, oh, I observe I'm being sad today. So how come? Like the curiosity comes in, right? And so observation tends to create unity, and it doesn't create so much polarity, so much separation. And so I always call myself a compassionate observer of humanity. Yeah. And so it's like, wow, look at that person struggling. They're going to learn so much. Like there's just a compassionate observation of that. And then again, if I want to follow it up with an action, I do. Throw the physical body in there and follow it up with an action. But if I'm not called to follow it up with an action, I don't.
Cool. That's really awesome. Well, because I want to relate this podcast to sports a little bit, I'm just going to quickly ask, what was your experience in sport growing up? And what is your opinion of it?
Freakishly small. As a tiny, tiny person. I know if we had the laws we had now, we would have had to have a booster seat on the bus. So I was never really drawn to sort of organized sport, team sports. Again, I have a lot of empathy. I'm very, very psychic, very empathic. So any kind of collective energy like that would actually weigh on me quite heavily. So when people were getting angry during sports or have an overly competitive attitude, that was quite debilitating for me. And so I tended to steer around it. But and as we've spoke of, I really am a believer in unstructured play. Yeah. And that's really how I moved myself through my youth. And when I got older, even into being a drama minor in school and in university, because I just feel like it sparks the creative body. Yeah. You're actually working in your imagination. You're working out of your right brain. You're sort of that unstructured play. And so if I talked about sport in any way for me, it would be around unstructured play, around using your imagination, creating, pretending, doing all of that. Seeing a group of children get together and create the game. Do you know what I mean? Not sort of go off the rules and have an adult sort of directing them. I think that this is sort of, I'm thinking, is one of the sadnesses of our modern society, is that we don't feel safe enough to send our children out unaccompanied into the neighborhood or into the world. And I'm sad about that, because now you have to have an adult sort of watching over you, which isn't a bad thing, except for the kids don't get this sort of sense of freedom. Yeah, of course. Make whatever up they want and to get a pecking order and tell them no, don't, this solves the problem. And do you know what I mean? Work together as a group. I feel like it's lost. So many people are talking about obesity in children and the fact that everyone gaming. Well, I mean, if you can't go out and play without your parent, and your parent's working, and they've got then life when they get home from work, what do you have left, right?
Absolutely,
you either have organized sport, again, not a judgment around that. It's just, when does unstructured play? So if you think about it, a video is literally the only unstructured play.
Yeah, it gives them a chance for their imagination to work, but...
Exactly. And so I think that's a great sadness. I think it's a great loss. And I would love, if there's somebody listening out there who has an idea about that, you just run with that sector, because I'm sad about that. I grew up in the middle of nowhere on a farm, and I'd be gone all day onto our property somewhere with the dog and a horse and riding around. And I mean, just being happy in my own company.
Yeah.
Nobody was initiating me. Nobody was motivating me. Nobody was saying, you got to go, oh, we'll do this better. I think that's a gift. I wished I could have given it to my two boys, because they grew up in the city, and I tried to give them as much unstructured play as I could, because I just feel like it fosters such a balanced human.
Yeah.
Such a balanced human.
Absolutely. All right. Well, time went by really fast, but just to maybe touch on everything. So the four bodies.
Yep. The mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical.
Right. And they all of your emotional, or your, the three first ones show in your physical body.
Exactly.
And that's how you get the messages. Awesome. And then for females, a lot of the issues with starting their own businesses come from the fear of not nurturing everyone around them and giving themselves the time.
That's right. When you're perfectly capable of nurturing many. Yeah, you already are. And so,
as long as you put yourself first.
To build up all those bodies, get your body, all four of those bodies, really beautifully healthy, and not self-ish, but self-first.
Yeah.
And there's a difference there. Self-ish is taking from somebody else, where self-first is putting yourself first and then sharing that with others.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Okay, and for you, empowerment basically means being conscious, which I think is a great way to look at it.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're already empowered. You're already perfect. You're already whole. Nobody came here half-assed. So, you know what I mean? Everybody's got all those bodies, all functioning in different ways. And so, you get to come in, and then now, what if you're conscious of those things? What if you're actually managing and being conscious of your thought, and being conscious of your emotions and how they're affecting you and everyone around you, conscious of your belief systems, and conscious of your experience. So rather than sort of thinking, I gotta sort of figure this out as I go along, no, just watch it and be the observer of it. And then conscious, of course, of the physical body, which is so important. Obviously, this is the thing that's the most fragile. The physical body can be hurt and broken and killed and terminated, and so and then it gives those three intangible bodies nothing to interface with. So the physical body becomes a very important aspect of your experience. You can't have an experience without it.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
So I just love I think having a human experience is yummy. It's like, wow, what can I truly experience consciously right now? Yeah. And use that beautiful physical body and all those other bodies to have the experience.
Yeah, and then a great way to move that physical body is through creative play and unstructured play
and structured play and sport. All balance, right? It all comes into balance. One of a whole bunch of one thing is never good. Yeah, so moderation and understanding. So because there's lessons and incredible teachings and experiences you can learn through organized sport as well. Yeah. But for me, that I really wanted to touch on that because of course I don't think people think about it.
No. Yeah, you think of sport as structured and having specific rules and
exactly. And I like to be an advocate for the unstructured sport.
Perfect. So if people love this interview, which I'm sure they did, I did. Where can they find more about you?
So best place to go is thehealingeye.com, and that's the letter I, not to the physical eye. So
yeah, we'll link to that.
Yeah, so the physical, so the Healing Eye. You could buy my book. Talking to Myself, Evolving on Purpose, which talks about a lot of this. This is just what we talked about, actually, just the first couple of chapters.
Yeah.
And it goes really far deep into more consciousness. And I don't know, let's stop by for tea one day,
Yeah, well, and you're a part of a really awesome event coming up in Grand Prairie.
The Life Mastery Symposium, which I'm excited about because it's 5 local people.
Yeah.
And often, everyone says you're not important unless you come with a suitcase. So I think it's important to understand that we have this really rich community, intuitive community, that I think the Life Mastery Symposium is filling a niche that literally is not filled yet, where we're connecting this sort of consciousness being into all aspects of your life. So Life Mastery means when you leave that weekend, you've got all the tools to master your life, to be conscious in all those bodies.
Sounds like a great event. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you,
my very first interview.
Well, you did awesome. I hope it's well.
Yeah.